As night settles, imagine a quiet lake covered in a thin layer of mist, drifting as slowly as a morning breath. Nothing is in a hurry. Each strand of mist simply dissolves on its own, little by little, as if it too is learning how to let go gently. And in that soft moment, you can feel your own body wanting to slow down, wanting to release everything it has carried through the day, allowing the mind to rest in the calm stillness of the night. Everything can be set down, slowly, softly, and without force. Grandpa Ellis always came to the lake the moment the moon began to rise, when the water was still enough to look like a mirror that was quietly breathing. He never brought much with him, just a thick coat and his habit of sitting on the same familiar stone, where he could watch his shadow blend with the moon's reflection until the two disappeared into each other. That night, the breeze was so soft that a single yellow leaf fell from a high branch and seemed to glide through the air, touching the surface of the lake without making a sound. Ellis watched it drift, slow, so slow, as if the leaf already knew the way out and didn't need to be pushed, didn't resist, didn't cling to anything. He lowered his head a little, the thin moonlight resting on his gray hair like a faint layer of silver. And in that moment, something inside his chest began to loosen too. Not a sharp sadness, not a clear memory, just a vague feeling, like dust on an old drawer he hadn't dared to open in years. He didn't try to think about it. He just sat there, letting the cold night air touch his skin, listening to the water whisper under the gentlest wind, and keeping his eyes on the yellow leaf drifting farther from the stone where he sat. It had been a long time since Ellis allowed himself to sit beside the lake on a night this still. Years ago, he avoided this place, afraid the quiet surface would reveal things he wasn't ready to see. But tonight was different. He wasn't here to confront anything. He was here to let his shoulders fall a little, to let his heavy breath slip out the way morning mist slips away when the sun rises. And as he watched the leaf turn slowly with the current, he felt something unusual. It no longer unsettled him the way things once did. It simply passed by. Memories are like that. Some things used to pull his chest tight every time they returned. A name, an old room, a long, rainy afternoon. They clung to him as if letting go would make them return even stronger. But sitting here with the wind sliding across the lake, he realized they were nothing more than dried leaves touching the water, floating away along their own path. Whether he watched them or not, they would leave the shore. Ellis exhaled slowly. The moon stretched across the lake like a thin silver thread, touching the yellow leaf that was now just a tiny speck. He didn't try to pull it back. He didn't try to keep it in sight. He simply let it go. And as he let it go, he felt his chest widen, his breath deepen, and the silence around him grow softer. The wind shifted so gently that Ellis only noticed it when the surface of the lake began to ripple. Thin, delicate waves spreading out like threads of silver. Strange, he thought. Even the water knows how to breathe. As he watched those ripples widen, he saw the yellow leaf turn in a tiny circle before drifting farther away, almost as if it were asking him one last time, "Are you sure you want to let me go?" Ellis smiled so softly that he didn't even realize he had done it. There was nothing left to hold on to, no reason to cling to something that had already fallen from its branch long ago. For many years, Ellis believed letting go of the past meant making it disappear completely. He tried to forget, tried to bury, tried to walk faster so he wouldn't hear it following behind him. But the strange thing was, the more he tried to forget, the clearer it became. The more he tried to bury it, the stronger it rose. The faster he walked, the more it clung to his heels, turning every step into the weight of old rain he never asked to carry. Tonight, watching the yellow leaf float across the moonlit water, he saw something different. The leaf didn't vanish the moment it drifted away. It was still there, still circling, still catching the moon's reflection. But it no longer belonged to the branch it had left behind, and he no longer needed to chase after it to make sure it was truly gone. Another breeze passed, carrying the scent of damp grass. Ellis closed his eyes for a moment. Behind his eyelids, an old scene returned. A door slamming shut, someone walking away quickly, his own voice too late to call out. That memory used to crush him whenever it appeared, but now it rose like a faint beam of light, present but no longer tightening his chest. It was just like the leaf, still existing, but no longer in control. When he opened his eyes, the lake had returned to its original state, still wide and gentle, like a curtain soft enough to hide the smallest movements beneath. Ellis wondered whether he had changed, or whether something in this quiet night was helping him see differently. But then he realized he didn't need an answer. Some things become heavier when we try to understand them too hard. Better to let them be like wind on water, passing through without leaving a cut. The yellow leaf had drifted far away now, just a tiny speck lost in the silver path of the moon. Ellis didn't try to look for it anymore. He pulled his coat closer, inhaled slowly, as if taking the stillness of the lake directly into his chest. Maybe the past never disappears completely, but like that fallen leaf, it always has a direction to travel, if he's willing to let it go. Ellis leaned back slightly, letting his shoulders rest against the rough bark of the tree behind him. The texture was uneven, but the support made him feel steadier inside the gentle quiet of the night. The lake whispered in soft ripples, like the faint footsteps of someone walking slowly down a long hallway. Nothing rushed. Nothing demanded a response. He only had to sit here watching the surface change shades whenever a cloud crossed the moon, then brighten again as the silver light returned, spreading across the water like a thin sheet of silk. A cloud drifted by, dimming the moon for a moment before revealing it again. The rhythm of light and shadow made Ellis think of the phases of his own life. Moments sharp and clear, moments blurred and heavy, days when his heart felt bright like a newborn moon, and days when it felt thick and starless. He once forced himself to always be steady, strong, okay. But as he watched the lake soften and darken like breath, he understood that nothing stays the same forever. Not even him. A small gust swept across the water, carrying a few more leaves that had fallen from branches farther away. They spun gently, touched each other, then drifted apart, each leaf following its own path. One moved quickly, another slowed by a tiny swirl in the current. The sight warmed something inside Ellis. Even the leaves had their own pace, their own way of letting go. The thought made him exhale deeply, like he had finally put down something had been carrying too long without noticing. He remembered the days when he wished every memory would disappear at once, fall away in a single sweep like leaves blown off by a sudden wind. But tonight, watching this quiet lake, he realized he didn't need that anymore. He didn't need dramatic change. He didn't need the force of a storm. He only needed to recognize that each memory, each leaf, has its own rhythm of leaving. And his only task was to stop holding on with both hands. A long stillness settled when the wind paused. The lake returned to the same calm it had when Ellis first sat down. He looked at his reflection, the moon revealing the soft lines around his eyes. Something gentle moved inside him, an ease he had rarely allowed himself to feel. Maybe it was because he had lived so close to his past for so many years. He forgot that stepping back even a little could let the water grow still again. Ellis lowered his head once more, not to hide from his memories, but as a quiet thank you to the leaf that had drifted away long ago. It had taught him what words often cannot, that letting go is sometimes nothing more than watching something that once felt heavy float farther and farther across the lake, until it becomes only a tiny speck in the moonlight, then fades into the gentle darkness of the night. Ellis stayed there a little longer, until the moon began to tilt and the lake turned into a softer shade of silver. Even the night insects had gone quiet, as if the whole forest was holding one last pocket of silence for him to breathe in. He looked at the place on the water where the yellow leaf had once drifted, and realized he no longer needed to see it to know it was gone. Not vanished, just far enough now that it no longer pulled his heart down when he remembered it. He rose slowly. His knees trembled a little, but his chest felt as calm as the lake after a passing breeze. As he stepped away from the familiar stone, it felt like setting down something he had carried for far too long. Not a dramatic release, just a gentle gesture, like brushing dust from a shoulder at the end of a long day. What surprised him was that he didn't feel empty. Instead, there was a lightness in his chest, as if every bit of space that opened inside him was being filled with the soft night air. Before leaving, Ellis turned back one more time. The moon lay across the lake like a silver scarf, so smooth that he wondered for a moment if the night itself had reshaped him, made him a quieter, lighter version of who he had been. Then he simply smiled. There was no need to name the change. It was enough to know that when the old leaf drifted away from him, it carried the heaviest part of the memory with it, leaving behind a stillness he hadn't touched in years. And in that stillness, Ellis understood. He had finally begun to let go. Slowly, softly, one breath at a time. Some early mornings in forest temples, the fog grows so thick that you can't see anything more than a few steps ahead. Everything softens. The old stone bricks, the curved temple roof, even the narrow path leading into the courtyard. But through that heavy mist, the temple bell still rings. Distant, yet unmistakably clear, like a gentle reminder that there are things we don't need to see with our eyes in order to understand with the quiet inside us. And when you look into that fog, you realize something simple. The fog isn't trying to erase the world. It's not forcing anything out of sight. It's only softening the edges, making everything less sharp, less harsh, easier for the eyes to rest on. Memories work the same way. They don't need to disappear for us to be at peace. We don't need to force ourselves to forget in order to be free. Often what makes the heart heavy is not the memory itself, but the way we try to push it away, lock it up, or pretend it was never there. In Buddhist teaching, there is a gentle view. Whatever has passed is simply an imprint of the mind. It appears when conditions are right, and it fades when we stop giving it too much power. Just like morning fog, it covers but doesn't distort. It softens but doesn't lie about what's beneath. It lets us look again without hurting. When a memory rises, whether warm or painful, we don't need to resist it. Resistance only makes it cling tighter. The way stirring a lake only makes the water grow cloudy. But if you leave the water still, everything settles on its own. Letting go isn't running from the past. It's simply not letting the past dictate how you feel right now. It's not forgetting quickly. It's allowing it to become something that lives behind you, no longer pulling you backward. In thick morning fog, people often pause at the temple gate, letting their breath mix with the cold air, letting their eyes relax into the soft blur of the world. When you stop trying to peel the fog away, you begin to see the real beauty of the morning. A quietness as wide and clear as the bell ringing through the air. It's the same with memory. When you stop trying to banish it, it loses its sharpness. It becomes only a thin layer of mist, one that will lift when the sun rises in its own time. And inside that gentle blur, you discover a spaciousness you didn't know you had. A place where memories can exist without having the power to hurt you anymore. When you stand in the temple courtyard, wrapped in morning fog, is a particular moment that often arrives quietly. The realization that nothing in the mist has actually disappeared. The tiled roof is still there. The path is still there. The trees remain exactly where they have always been. They just aren't sharp anymore. And somehow, that lack of sharpness makes your mind breathe more easily. Human beings don't always need clarity. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let what was once too clear become gently blurred. Memories take the same shape. They don't need to be erased from the mind. They don't need to be denied or held tightly. They only need permission to soften enough for you to see them as part of your journey, not part of your burden. There are memories that once made your heart drop, memories that turned long nights into a weight sitting on your chest. But when you place them inside the soft fog of quiet awareness, you begin to see them as nothing more than images passing through. Not currents dragging you backward. In the gentle teachings of the Buddha, there is a simple view. When something comes, know that it comes. When it goes, know that it goes. No chasing, no resisting, just observing with a soft heart. When you look at a memory with a mind that is tight and clenched, the memory becomes sharp like broken glass. But when you look at it with a wider, more open mind, it becomes like mist on your skin. You can feel it, but it doesn't hurt you. Letting go in this sense is not an action, but a state of being. It is the state of allowing everything to rest in its natural place. The past stays in the past. Memories remain memories. They don't need to disappear for you to move on, nor do they need to be forced into the depths of your mind for you to be at peace. The only thing that matters is not letting them define how you feel today. And when you truly see this, the mind naturally opens into a gentle spaciousness, a space where the distant bell sounds clearer, where each breath moves more easily, where the fog lifts on its own without anyone waiting for it. This is the space where memories can exist without unsettling the heart. A place where you can keep walking without erasing anything, simply by not carrying it so tightly. In that softness, you realize something important. Letting go is not forgetting. Letting go is allowing the memory to stand behind you while you move forward with one slow, soft step at a time. Finally, quietly free. The village road held no lamps that night, only flashes of lightning tearing across the sky before sinking back into the damp darkness. Brother Theo pulled his hood over his head, but the heavy drops still struck his cloak hard, soaking through every layer until the weight settled heavily on his shoulders. He walked fast, then faster, as if speed alone could help him escape the storm surrounding him. But the faster he moved, the more the rain gathered with each gust of wind, pressing his clothes against his skin, cold, heavy, like an invisible hand pulling him back. Theo's breath grew thick, not because the road was long, but because the effort of resisting was slipping into every inhale. He kept thinking that if he moved quickly enough, urgently enough, the storm would give up and leave him alone. But the rain did not fall because of him, nor did it care about the rhythm of his footsteps. It didn't lessen, simply because he tried to outrun it. In fact, the more he dodged it, the deeper the cold seeped into his bones, tightening his shoulders, squeezing his chest, and stirring his mind into the same chaos as the wind whipping through the bamboo along the roadside. It had been years since Theo walked this rain-soaked path. It reminded him of old days, days when he tried to run from things inside him. A sentence someone said, a face he couldn't forget, a tightening feeling he didn't know how to hold. Whenever memories started to pour down, he reacted exactly as he did now, walking faster, looking away, pushing everything into a dark corner of his mind. But just like the storm on this road, memories did not weaken because he resisted them. They only grew louder, stronger, returning with more force the more he tried to drive them out. A sudden gust hit him hard, making him stop. He bent down, both hands on his knees, panting. His cloak was completely drenched, water sliding down his neck and gathering between his shoulders like cold threads. He shivered, but in that moment, standing still beneath the rain, no longer running, no longer pushing, Theo noticed something small but unmistakably true. When he stopped, the rain wasn't as frightening. It was still cold, still heavy, still falling from a dark sky. But the feeling of being chased was gone. The rain wasn't pursuing him. He had only exhausted himself, believing that it was. His breath softened a little. Not much, but enough for him to straighten up, lower his hands, and let his body stop shrinking into itself. The rain kept falling, but now it fell on someone who had stopped trying to flee. Brother Theo stood in the rain as if he had just stepped out of a long chase he hadn't realized he had been running for years. Water dripped from the edge of his hood onto his nose, onto his chin, landing with tiny taps on the muddy ground. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, the sound made him feel present. Here, in this exact moment. Not in the rush of thoughts that usually swallowed him. Not in the old memories that tightened his breath. The cold still pressed against his skin, but it no longer backed him into a corner. It was just rain, just weather, just a circumstance. He happened to be standing inside. He lifted his head toward the sky. The rain wasn't heavier and it wasn't lighter. It was simply falling in its own way. And somehow, when he wasn't running anymore, the drops hitting his face felt different. Not like an attack, but like contact. Not something trying to consume him. Just water coming down from the sky, as it had through every season, through every storm he had ever lived through. Theo suddenly remembered how painful memories showed up. Shards of old days he never wanted to face. Every time they appeared, he reacted exactly as he had always reacted to rain on this road, by speeding up, thinking faster, doing more, filling his schedule until there was no space for memories to slip in. But strangely, the more noise he created, the more exhausted he became. And the more exhausted he became, the easier it was for memories to surge up again. It was exactly like running through a storm. The more he tried to avoid the rain, the wetter he became. A distant thunder rolled across the mountains. Theo closed his eyes and felt the vibration move through the air before fading into the dark. He didn't feel fear. He didn't feel the urge to respond with panic or action. He just stood there, letting the rain fall, letting the thunder pass, letting his breath slow a little. Something inside him, something he couldn't name, was loosening, as if a rope tied around his chest had begun to uncoil thread by thread. He realized that maybe the pain of his past was never as large as he had imagined. It was his resistance to it that turned it into a shadow. Just like this storm, it wasn't chasing him, wasn't trying to frighten him. He only made himself smaller when he tried to outrun it. Theo opened his eyes. The dirt road ahead was still long, still dark. But now each step he was about to take didn't carry the pressure it once did. He didn't need the rain to stop in order to move forward. He didn't need to force himself to be strong. He just needed to breathe. One slow breath. One true breath. And for the first time in many years, he felt he was no longer being chased by his past. Brother Theo kept walking, but now his steps were slow. So much slower than when he had been running. Each footstep left a small mark in the puddles, disappearing and filling again as if the earth itself were breathing along with him. His cloak was still soaked, still heavy, but strangely he no longer cared. The cold no longer bit at his skin. It simply reminded him that he was alive, that he could still feel the world in its raw, honest way. The rain hadn't changed, only he had. As he moved deeper into the dim stretch of road, the smell of wet soil rose stronger, mixing with the scent of trees after the storm. It felt as if those smells created more space inside his chest. Not an empty, aching space, but the kind that gives the breath room to open. He realized how long he had been breathing, like someone afraid to use too much air. Short, tight, half-held breaths, the same way he had pushed old memories to the bottom of his mind. Now he breathed just a little deeper, and that little was somehow enough to make his body feel lighter, enough to make him realize he was no longer locked inside himself. The rain began to ease, not because he wished for it to stop, but simply because it had reached the moment when it naturally changed its rhythm. The drops grew thinner, softer, landing on the road like a whisper instead of a demand. He stopped beneath a large tree. Water still dripped from the leaves onto his shoulders, but the weight of it was different, gentler, almost kind. And in that new quiet, he understood what the rain had been teaching him all along. What exhausts us is not the storm, but the strain of resisting it. What hurts is not the memory itself, but the fear of facing it. He looked up. The sky was still dark, but in the distance, a thin patch of brightness had opened. Not sunlight, just a small sign that the night was beginning to change. And that small sign was enough to warm him from the inside. The past didn't need to clear away like a sudden sunrise. It only needed to stop blocking every direction he tried to walk. When Theo started walking again, his steps were so gentle that the water no longer splashed as high around his feet. He wasn't trying to stay dry. He wasn't avoiding the deeper puddles. He simply walked through them, just as someone walks through the past without fighting, without dodging, without rushing. And with each step, he felt it more clearly. Once he stopped running, he was no longer being chased. At the end of the road, he paused one last time. The rain was almost gone, leaving only the soft dripping from the treetops. He placed a hand on his chest, feeling the steady rhythm. No urgency, no tightness. And in that calm, he whispered to himself, not as advice, but as acceptance. Letting go isn't forgetting. Letting go is simply stopping the fight. Then he walked toward the faint morning light opening in the distance, carrying no old fear with him, only a breath soft enough to keep going. There are streams that have flowed for hundreds of years, so gentle that when you place your hand in the water, you can barely feel the force of the current. The water simply slides past your skin, soft as the earth's long exhale. And yet, if you look at the stones beneath that quiet stream, you will see the smooth curves carved into them. Not by a violent flood, not by sudden power, but by the soft, patient touch of water, repeated again and again. Gentle enough to comfort, steady enough to change everything it meets. Time works in the same way. It doesn't rush. It doesn't make noise. It simply stays. And the things that once felt heavy inside us, old memories, lingering pain, moments we thought we could never move past, do not remain forever in their sharp, original form. They shift. They soften. They are rounded by every day that passes, every breath we take, every moment we stop resisting as fiercely as we once did. A memory in the heart is like a large stone. When it first falls into the stream, it is sharp, heavy, and takes up space. But time never tries to force it away. It only touches it with the same light, steady rhythm. And that softness turns out to be the strongest force of all. What hurts us is not the memory itself, but the way we keep gripping its sharp edges. When we loosen our hold and let the memory rest in the flow of time, those edges soften on their own, just like stone worn smooth by water. No one sees this process happening while it is happening. There is no moment when the stone announces that today it has been shaped a little more. But eventually, one day, when you look closely, you realize you no longer react the way you once did. Your heart doesn't tighten in the same place. You don't have to brace yourself just to think of it. It's like glancing down into the stream and suddenly noticing that the stone that was once jagged is now round, calm, settled under the clear water. Time doesn't erase anything from us. It simply changes the role of what remains. What once weighed you down settles like a smooth stone, still there, but no longer hurting. What once made you stop becomes part of the ground you now step across. And what once frightened you becomes a faint mark in the flow, present but no longer in control. When you understand this, you see that you don't need to force your memories to disappear. You don't need to fight harshly with what once hurt you. All you need is to let time touch it softly, patiently, naturally. And one day, without trying, you will look back and realize you have become lighter. Just like the stream never announces it is shaping the stones, yet it always does. So gently that no one notices until the change is already complete. Aunt May always brewed tea in the late afternoon, even on days when the wind swept hard across the porch, and the sky was so dim it was impossible to tell when the sun had slipped away. Her hands trembled slightly with age, yet every movement was gentle, as if she were speaking quietly with the warmth spreading from the teapot. Today was no different. She set the pot down on the old wooden table, and steam rose in a thin veil, touching the cold air before dissolving. She watched the steam for a moment, then looked at her own hands, as though something inside her was also trying to dissolve slowly the way the tea mist did. Beside her chair sat a large fabric bag. It was old, its color faded, its straps frayed, and whenever she lifted it, it made a dense, heavy sound. Aunt May had carried it all the way from the far end of the village. No one knew exactly what was inside, but everyone could see how it pulled her shoulders downward, how it slowed her steps a little more each day. When she sat, she placed her hand on the bag, then pulled it back almost immediately, as if the weight inside wasn't just fabric and belongings, but something that lived in her chest as well. She poured herself tea. The pale, golden liquid warmed her palms, and when she brought the cup close and inhaled its fragrance, her eyes softened. The wrinkles around her temples relaxed. Then, almost out of habit, her gaze drifted back to the bag. She looked at it the way someone looks at something old. They aren't ready to lay down yet. There were days she imagined leaving the bag somewhere far from home and feeling lighter instantly. But every time her fingers touched the worn straps, a familiar, hard-to-name feeling rose inside her. Part regret, part fear, part exhaustion. One part of her longed to set it down and walk away. Another part kept pulling her toward it, urging her to hold it tight, as if letting go meant losing something precious. Yet the more she held on, the more her shoulders ached. Her breath shortened, and sleep slipped further from reach. Today, though, something made her stay still longer than usual. Maybe it was the quiet, maybe the warm tea, maybe her trembling hands had simply grown too tired to keep pretending to be strong. She set her cup down gently and looked at the bag again. This time, she didn't look away. She didn't rush. Her eyes were soft, tired, yes, but no longer resisting. And in that moment, she knew it was time to open the bag, or at the very least, to let it rest a little more lightly on the floor. Aunt May bent down and let her fingers touch the strap of the bag. Her fingertips were cold, but the strap was warmer than she expected. Maybe because it had been resting against her leg ever since she came home. She closed her hand around it, released it, then held it again. Her breathing stayed steady but slow, as if she were testing whether she had enough courage to lift the bag one more time. At last, she pulled it closer and opened the flap. Nothing dramatic happened, just the soft scrape of fabric against fabric. Yet the sound felt like she had opened an old drawer in her memory. Inside were stones, not precious stones, but rough, palm-sized gray, cold pieces of rock. She had picked them up over many years. No one knew why she carried them home, and truthfully, she couldn't explain it clearly herself. She only knew that whenever something felt heavy in her heart, she picked up a stone and placed it in the bag, as if tucking away a feeling she wasn't ready to face. But today, looking at them, she didn't find them frightening. They just sat there silent and still. They weren't trying to speak. They weren't trying to cling to her. What made them heavy was the way she had been holding them. She reached in and lifted one stone. Her hands trembled so the stone wobbled slightly before resting in her palm. It was as cold as well water, enough to send a small shiver through her. She turned it over, studying the uneven edges, and let out a long breath, not from sadness, but from realizing just how long she had carried these things without rest. On the table, the teapot still released soft warmth. She placed the stone beside her steaming cup. One warm, one cold, one fragrant, one weighty. In that contrast, she finally saw something she had avoided for years. The stone wasn't what tired her. It was the fact that she never set it down long enough to let her hands rest. She touched the stone again. This time, her movement was gentler. No shrinking back, no tightening of her fingers, just a simple touch, like someone looking at an old moment without being pulled back into it. Then she did something rare for her. She left the stone on the table. She didn't throw it away. She didn't make any sudden decision. She simply let it remain there beside the teapot that warmed her cheek with quiet steam. She inhaled deeply. The fragrance of the tea spread softly into her chest, widening her breath just a little. Just a little, but that little bit was enough for her to feel she wasn't resisting anything anymore. And in that small moment, she understood setting something down doesn't have to happen all at once. Aunt May poured a little more tea into her cup, and the rising steam warmed her chilled cheeks. For the first time, that whole long afternoon, the small room felt as if it had drawn in closer. Not so wide, not so hollow, with quiet sadness. The dim light from the window glowed softly across the stone on the table, turning its gray surface gentle as if it were breathing along with her. She looked toward the old cloth bag. There were still many stones inside, pieces of memory she had carried home year after year. Some were large and heavy, their sharp edges enough to make her hand ache if she held them too long. Others were small ones she might have picked up without remembering why, but they were piled on top of one another, forming a weight she carried every day as if it were simply part of life. She reached into the bag and lifted another stone. This time, her hand didn't tremble as much. The stone was cold, but it no longer frightened her the way the first one had. She set it beside the other stone, forming a small row. Two quiet pieces of the past, resting in plain sight instead of hidden in the dark. She exhaled. The breath came out longer, softer, warmed by the tea still lingering in her throat. And with that clarity, she realized something simple. All these years, she believed she couldn't put the bag down because it was too heavy. But the truth was, she had never tried setting it down in pieces. In her mind, it was always carry everything or drop everything. There was no middle ground, no slow, gentle pace that her aging heart had needed. A faint wind brushed against the porch, making the window rattle lightly. She turned to look outside. The sky was gray but calm, not threatening, not heavy. A sky very much like her in this moment. Not fully bright, not fully shadowed, but somewhere in between, slow and peaceful. Aunt May touched her chest. Her heartbeat wasn't racing the way it had when she first got home. It was steady. Not strong, not weak. Just steady. The realization made her eyes sting, as if a kind softness had finally reached a place inside she had been protecting for years. She looked back at the bag. Still old, still heavy, still nothing beautiful to look at. But it no longer overwhelmed her. She knew she couldn't empty the whole bag at once, and she no longer felt she had to. Right now, having just a few stones resting outside was enough to ease a burden she had once believed she would carry forever. She brushed a little dust from the opening of the bag, then folded it closed. Not tightly, not shut away, just gently, just enough. A small, simple gesture, but one that made her chest feel lighter, as if she had let out a long, silent breath she had held for years. And with a softness she hadn't expected, Aunt May realized. Some things don't need to be released all at once. Setting them down a little at a time is already enough for the heart to begin to rest. Aunt May sat quietly, For a long while, her hand resting gently on the warm tabletop, the two stones in front of her looked so much smaller than the heavy weight they once carried in her memory. The sight made her smile, soft, tired, but warm, like she had just stepped through a doorway no one else could see. She reached into the bag again, but this time not to lift another stone out, just to feel the weight that was still inside. And to her surprise, the bag was still heavy, but no longer the kind of heavy that felt impossible to carry. It felt more like something finally returning to its true weight, now that she had stopped giving it more meaning than it actually held. She pulled the bag closer to her chair and exhaled. But this breath was different. Not the breath of someone bracing themselves to endure, but the breath of someone who has realized they are allowed to pause when they need to. She lifted her teacup and took a small sip. The warmth traveled through her throat, down her chest, and spread through her belly like a quiet flame. She had never imagined a simple cup of tea could soften her heart this much. She glanced at the two stones on the table and reached out to touch them again. A gentle touch, as if she feared their coldness might numb her fingers. But instead, the touch made her feel strangely awake, clear. She realized she had spent so many years trying not to think about these things that she forgot she could simply touch them, see them, acknowledge them, without being swallowed by the past. Outside, the wind changed direction, bringing the smell of soil and damp grass into the small room. She inhaled deeply, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't merely getting through the day. She was actually living this moment, not running, not gripping, not turning away, just living right here with warm tea and two stones finally placed down. Slowly, she stood up, each movement deliberate, almost tender, as if every gesture needed to be felt. She picked up the two stones and carried them out to the porch. Evening was settling in, and the last light stretched across the yard like a thin scarf. She placed the stones at the edge of the step, not to throw them away, not to claim them back, just to let them rest somewhere that wasn't her shoulder anymore. Then she went inside and closed the porch door. Not hurried, not strained. She sat back in her chair, her shoulders so light she was almost surprised at herself. The feeling wasn't dramatic or grand. It was simply real. Light, the same way a shawl feels when you slide it gently off your shoulders. Not torn away, just released. Aunt May placed a hand on her chest. Her heartbeat was steady, warm, beneath her old sweater. And in that quiet steadiness, she understood something true. Burdens don't disappear in a single night. But each time, she put down just a little. One stone, one breath. Her heart opened a bit more. And in that slow, gentle way of hers, Aunt May finally began to know what it means to let go. Slowly, little by little, but enough for her heart to rest. Deep in the forest, there are branches tied by old pieces of rope, ropes faded by sun and wind over the years. They are not pulled tight, but just enough to make the branches lean to one side, unable to grow straight. Thalen, the one people call the keeper of the forest, often walks those hidden paths and sees these loose, tired ropes. He never yanks them off or cuts them immediately. He simply uses 2 fingers to loosen them just a little. And strangely, with only that small release, the branch lifts itself a bit, as if it had only been waiting for a little more room to breathe. The past in the human heart is just like those old ropes. It doesn't always bind us tightly. Sometimes it hangs only lightly around us, but still enough to tilt our whole being toward heaviness. We often think we must cut these memories away completely to be free. But most of the burden isn't in the memory itself. It's in how tightly we are holding on. Out of fear of letting go, fear of losing something, fear of facing it, fear of the emptiness that might follow. If we look closely, we will see that most of what makes us weary are only loosely tied ropes. They don't pull us to the ground. They don't lock us in place. They just make us lean. And with just one deep breath, one moment of gentle acceptance, one quiet evening where we allow ourselves to feel again, those ropes already loosen on their own. When Thalen loosens a rope, he doesn't try to force the branch to stand perfectly straight. He only creates space so the branch can find its own natural balance. The same is true for the human heart. When we stop trying to fix everything in one moment, the heart knows how to lighten itself. Just a small bit of room is enough for the breath to go deeper, enough to make tomorrow less heavy than today. A loosely tied rope does not need to be cut. It only needs to be gently loosened. And our memories are the same. They do not need to disappear for us to move forward. They do not need to be erased for us to feel at peace. They only need to stop gripping our steps and pulling our shoulders down every time they rise in the mind. Once we see this, the heart opens a little wider. We realize we don't need force to let go, we need softness. Letting go is not a dramatic break. It is a very small gesture, very gentle, but done at the right moment. Just like that loose rope, loosened only slightly, gives the branch room to rise and lets the wind pass through with ease. And when we give our own heart that same bit of loosened space, we understand something tender and true. The past was never truly tying us down. It was just waiting for us to ease our grip so we could finally feel light again.